If you know me and my work, you know that I always say how important it is to surrender and to release resistance, but how do you actually know whether you've surrendered or whether you're just giving up and you just feel super defeated in your process? That's what we'll be diving into today, surrender versus defeat. But first, welcome to my space, welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, then welcome back. I love you. If you're completely new here, then hello. My name is Lorena. I am a self-concept coach and mentor, and I am here to support you in changing your state of being, stepping into the most aligned, most authentic version of yourself, transforming your self-concept and rebirthing yourself into your future self now so that you can manifest the most aligned and authentic soul desires that you have from a really integrated place. If you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you don't miss the weekly videos. And I would also love it if you left a like and a little comment and maybe shared the video with a friend. And if you want personal support, if you want to dive deeper into your own personal state and self-concept and transform that really deeply, then I invite you to check out the description box below, because there you can find information on how to work with me, how to join my signature coaching program, Recreate Yourself, where we'll spend 12 weeks together and transform your self-concept really radically. You will not be the same after this program. You can also find a bunch of resources and other things in the description box below. So today we're gonna dive into the topic of surrender. We're gonna talk about the importance of surrendering, why it's so important to do this. We're also going to compare it to feeling defeated and really giving up, because the two are so similar, but there is a slight difference. And we're also gonna speak about the how to surrender. So make sure you stay until the very end. So let's begin by speaking about the importance of surrendering. Why do I speak about this so much? Why is it so important? And I have a whole bunch of videos about the topic of surrender. In fact, I'll link a whole playlist somewhere above my head or in the description box below, where you can check out more about the topic of surrender. But to bring it to you in a really concise way, if you're not surrendered, you are in resistance. If you are in resistance, what you resist persists. The more you go against something, the more you say, I don't want that, the more it will be part of your consciousness and thus part of your reality. Let's say you try to run from a feeling. What happens? It amplifies. You get more and more of it. Or if you try to run from a circumstance, you try to avoid or ignore a reality that's currently present for you, what happens? You're subconsciously telling yourself, this is a problem. This is a problem we need to fix. And because this is a problem we need to fix, it gets bigger than it actually needs to be. So resistance is the one thing that keeps your manifestations away and that keeps your transformation away, because your focus on the problem, your focus on the lack of something, or your focus on things not being the way you want them to be, just creates more of that experience, and it puts your consciousness towards that experience. And the other side of surrender is as well, you cannot manifest from a place of attachment. Attachment is the killer to your manifestation. If you're obsessing, it's good to be passionate about something. It's good to be like immersed in something. That's great. That's what we want, right? You want to be fully immersed in something. And that's why desire is such a leading force that can really, that does manifest. Desire is the catalyst to your manifestation. So you need to desire. But when you're obsessing over it to the point where you're attached, where you're gripping, where you're clinging on really tightly, where you feel like you can't be happy without it, where you can't loosen the grip, where it's all you're thinking about, or where you can't be satisfied with what you already have, you're really going to block yourself from experiencing that thing that you desire because of that attachment. And that attachment automatically, again, creates resistance. So surrendering releases attachment as well. It releases attachment, it releases resistance, and therefore it makes things come to you faster. It makes you more magnetic to the things that you want, because you're open to receiving them. You're not trying to control everything. You're just, hi, I'm receptive to this, I'm open to this. And it's an energetic shift. But surrender is different from the feeling of defeat. And the feeling of defeat, it's a feeling I am so familiar with. when I went through my primary period of shadow work and shadow integration, it's obviously an ongoing process. You know, we always need to uncover deeper and deeper layers. This is not hard work. This is not something that we need to resist or avoid. This is actually a beautiful part of your continuous evolution. But initially, when I was in the thick of it, when I was really uncovering all of these pieces and diving really deeply into my subconscious mind and getting really honest with myself, noticing what my true beliefs were, addressing the feelings that I had buried deep within. I was working with a really good coach at the time as well, and she helped me really uncover these pieces because it's so hard to do shadow work on your own. And you can journal about it, you can meditate on it, you can do somatic practices, which is a lot of the work that I do with my clients as well. But having somebody to talk to and to reflect things back to you and to pull these pieces of your subconscious out is invaluable. And that's what I was doing. And the primary thread that went through this period for me was the feeling of defeat, the feeling of hopelessness, and the feeling of powerlessness. I felt so incredibly powerless. I felt like everything that I touched wasn't working out. I felt like there was no hope, and I felt like I was constantly hitting failure and hitting a wall. And obviously, I mean, not obviously, maybe you don't know this, but whatever feeling is through your experience, like a thread, usually has a common source, right? You might think, oh, it's happening there and there and there and in these different areas of my life, and it happened in this moment and in this moment, but really it's a subconscious state that you're embodying because of maybe a past experience that you've had that really was so jarring for your subconscious mind that you try to avoid it at all costs. And the feeling of defeat and powerlessness and hopelessness, that was that feeling for me. That was what I was running from the most, and that was what I consequently was experiencing the most. Every time I tried to take my power back and every time I tried to control things, I would come up against that feeling of defeat and feeling defeated and feeling so lost and so hopeless and so powerless. So it's a feeling I'm very, very familiar with and that I constantly need to keep myself in check with. I frequently see people that are actually giving up, that are actually just feeling so defeated. They're not actively surrendering, they're just giving up. They just have lost all faith, lost all belief. And this is the difference between surrender and defeat. When you feel defeated, you've really lost faith. And sometimes that's part of the process, right? Sometimes we need to first get to a place of defeat before we can fully surrender. And I'll get to that in a bit more detail in a moment. But it's still a big difference between I am just allowing. Surrendering means allowing. I am just allowing. I am just open to receiving. I'm not controlling. And this is not just saying these words that I just said, but feeling this energetic shift in your being. And the flip side of it, the defeat, which is I am powerless, I am maybe even worthless, and this isn't possible, and I don't believe this, I've lost faith. And it's also often a natural part of the process to feel defeated. And this is why it's important to look at these different shadows, these different parts of your subconscious mind. And I would really invite you, if you haven't done this already, if you want to accelerate things for yourself, get support, hire a coach, find community. I'm telling you, don't resist taking that leap of faith. It's going to be so worth it to bet on yourself and to choose yourself in this way and to get support, because your own patterns can very much keep you stuck when you're doing it all by yourself and when you're in this energy of I have to do it alone. And I was there. I used to be there. I used to be that person who wanted to do everything alone. And then what I touched on as well already is that feeling of defeat can really come from a feeling of worthlessness, which is often the deeper layer, right? I'm not worth this. Not just necessarily the desire, but just deeper unworthiness issues that are within you, deeper feelings of unworthiness that might be within you. Again, not generalizing, this might not be you. This is just one way this can manifest. So let's talk a bit about the how-to, which I know is probably the part you're most interested in. So whether you're in a place of defeat or not, or maybe you're not sure, have I surrendered or do I just feel defeated? Have I just given up? Make sure that you're not making the situation or your success or lack thereof mean anything about you, because it doesn't mean anything about you. And you really want to detach whatever is happening from your worthiness, from your self-worth, and also from your happiness and from your contentment. If you make it mean something about you, that's you really giving your power away. And surrender doesn't mean giving up power. Surrender doesn't mean giving up power. It means giving up control, but it doesn't mean you're being powerless or you're seeing yourself as powerless. You have to remember that you are both God and human. You are both the divine and you are both nothing. You're everything and nothing all at once. And the human in you needs to be humble and needs to surrender to the divine in you. That's the part that surrenders. But that doesn't mean you're powerless as a whole, right? There's still a very powerful seed in you that's very much who you are. So it's always a bit of both, and this is why this balance is so key and why integration work is so key, because it brings these sides together. It brings the good and the bad, the light and the shadow, the God and the ego, brings it together and integrates it so that you're a full, whole being and you can create from this aligned place. And surrendering also doesn't mean inaction. This is also important. Sometimes when people drop into this place of defeat rather than surrender, they're like, okay, I'm not doing anything anymore. I'm not asking for help anymore. I'm not taking any action anymore. I'm not taking any leaps of faith anymore. I'm not getting coaching anymore. I'm not applying for jobs anymore, or I'm not dating anymore. I'm not doing anything anymore. The universe should just bring it to me. I'm surrendering. Now, obviously, sometimes you take action, sometimes you don't take action. Again, there's no one size fits all, and it depends on your situation, it depends on your personal issues, it depends on your personal state and your experience, and this is something that I cannot generalize for you. However, surrender doesn't mean you're not taking action. In fact, surrender can often be associated with action, but this action comes from an aligned place and doesn't come from a place of force or control. And that's the difference. Often when you surrender, you will take action, or if you're not taking action, at least you're consciously using this time to rest and recharge. So you're going to gain momentum later on to take action in the future. And then the other piece I want to mention with regards to how to surrender, this is more of just a reminder. If you are in this place of attachment and obsession, take a fucking break. Just take a fucking break from like thinking about the thing. It's also why the way I've designed my work, I've designed my coaching program, is it's not about whatever you desire. That's just an element of it. It's about you and your transformation, because I don't want you to obsess over a thing and think over a thing the whole time and just chase things, because it's not going to make you happy. It's not going to fulfill you. I say it all the time. You want to transform and rebirth yourself into a future version of yourself that is already who you are. I say future, but it's already who you are. You just need to access it and peel off those layers. So focus on yourself. Focus on yourself first and foremost. If you are obsessing over something or someone, take a step back and take a break. You will need that restful period, that period of integration, that period of recharging. That will be so useful for you. So then you can come back to it when you feel recharged and when you feel aligned. And I mentioned earlier that surrender and defeat can feel very, very similar. There's a slightly different energy to it, but it can feel very similar. And sometimes defeat comes before you surrender. Now, I want to tell you why that is the case. Because when you don't actively surrender, when it's not your choice, when you don't consciously surrender, you will be forced to do so. You will eventually be humbled, and you will eventually be met with resistance from life, from the universe, until you get to a place of defeat, which will be your catalyst into surrendering. So if you're not surrendering yourself, then you're going to be forced to surrender. You may have experienced this in the past where you tried to get something so much and you tried to force it and you tried to push harder and harder and harder, and the harder you pushed, the less it worked. That's so you can get to a place of surrender. And a different example, I know some of you have had some plant medicine experiences, and I find ayahuasca is a really good example for this, because ayahuasca is a medicine that when you are in resistance, when you don't surrender to it, it will force you to surrender. So if you are feeling defeated, not a problem. That could be your path to surrender. Allow that to bring you to a place of deeper surrender. And remember as well that surrender happens through the body, not just through the mind. I have definitely spoken to so many people on discovery calls before who said, oh, but I'm accepting the situation. I don't know if that's what surrender is. And it's not necessarily, it's just an aspect of it. You mentally accepting the situation is an aspect of it, of course. But surrender happens through the body, because when you surrender, you open. When you surrender, you're receptive. You're receptive to opportunities, and you're receptive to your manifestation coming in. It's an energetic shift. It's really difficult to describe because it's really better demonstrated, and this is why we have a lot of somatic practices in Recreate Yourself in my coaching program. If you are keen on joining that, by the way, if you want to work with me, then you can definitely check that out in the description box below, because this is also where this video ends. I think I've said everything that I wanted to say. Do leave me a comment and do subscribe. And I love you so much. I would love to hear how this landed for you. And I'll see you in next week's video.